I'm Shelley Lyle.
And I'm Brian Avery.
And welcome to Voices from the Field, a podcast brought to you by the University of Florida Sport Management Department. This podcast was created to share the career journeys of sport industry professionals. Our hope is that you learn the ins and outs of different sport industry professions. We're excited to be with all of you this week and with our special guest, Dan Glod. Dan is the Senior Vice President of Player Relations for the PGA Tour.
So Dan received his bachelor's in psychology from the University of Florida. His work experience includes 5 years as a VP of Business Development for the PGA Tour, over 3 years as President and Vice President of the Web.com Tour, and 2 years as Senior Vice President of Global Sponsorship, Strategy, and Development for the PGA. He is currently in his role as a Senior Vice President of Player Relations of the PGA Tour. It is a real pleasure to have Dan here today. Welcome.
Hi, Brian. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me. Hello to you and Shelley.
Yeah, we're excited you could be with us. And so just getting started, can you share your career journey? Obviously, we spoke a little bit about it, but if you could expand on that. And then when did you know you wanted to be in golf and involved in the tour?
Yeah, my career journey is probably pretty unusual. Not probably your traditional sports management pathway. For me, I've always had a job my whole life. Was the first in my family to go to college, and so as I got to school, I was putting myself through school. Started actually as pre-med, and shifted into psychology. I had this fascination around human behavior, and I was working through that, and just again trying to figure out exactly where I wanted to go. And at the time, Bob Rotella was an authored sports psychologist, and I always loved the game of golf. Was fortunate enough to play a few sports through high school, and so I kind of got fixated around this idea of let's go into sports psychology. And so as I worked different odd jobs through college, I actually started at a club in Gainesville where I was just kind of doing odds and ends to put myself through school, and kind of continued to grow in that. Graduated, started graduate school in sports psychology, and as I was going through that, met my now wife at Florida, and kind of scratching my head, going, what is it exactly that I want to do? As I think, as we talk to a lot of students now, what is it exactly I want to do? And I just got a very unique opportunity. The club I was working at, the gentleman who owned it owned a number of clubs, and here I was at 23 in grad school, engaged to be married. And Mr. Linhart said, "Hey, Dan, would you like to come work with us and do some fun stuff?" And so from there, it started my career route, if you will, my career path to where I am today.
That's awesome. And how have you seen the psychology piece kind of play into those roles?
Yeah, it's interesting whenever I have these type of chats or as we go through it, again, I'm fascinated by human behavior. I think no matter what you're doing, and listen to the people you're working with or working for or working around, and trying to understand that, I think it just sets you up for a way to be curious about things, and always, kind of always thinking about how can I help someone? How can I advance whatever problem it is? So it's worked out for me. Between that and kind of always a passion around kind of sport and business, I think the two have served me pretty well.
Awesome. And so can you tell us about your current position in player relations? What are your daily duties and roles? And then what are those responsibilities you don't think most students will know about?
Yeah, well, I think, as Brian was rattling off the things I've done, I guess I'm thankful I have a job. No, it's been really an amazing journey at the PGA Tour. I've been there almost 18 years now, and I've had an opportunity to do a number of different jobs, and we can get into that if that's helpful. But, the current role is a new role. So we have, since the PGA Tour began, we've always had an area called Player Relations, which is we have a team of great folks who travel every week, and their job really is to be the liaison between all of our players. The PGA Tour is a membership-based organization. So unlike other leagues, we don't have the league and a players association. We actually work for our members. We have player directors that serve on our board, and that's the structure of our relationship. So player relations is fundamental to our business in that any questions, concerns, comments, feedback that we have to provide one way or the other with a tour that travels, every week all around the globe. That's the function that player relations has always historically served. The area that I've just recently moved into here at the turn of the calendar is within player relations, but it's a focus, and I credit our commissioner and our board for thinking about this. It's really designed to work with our players. They're all independent contractors. Again, different from other sports. When you get to a tournament, if you miss the cut, you go home without a paycheck. So there's no guaranteed contracts, and the focus in what we're describing as player partnerships is to work with our players and their agents and their management teams to drive additional revenue, sponsorship opportunities, off-course sponsorship opportunities to them. So, we're about 90 to 120 days into this new role, and it's been an exciting journey already this far.
Yeah, that's really cool, and thanks for clarifying. Being the adjunct professor for athlete development, I know the ins and outs of the athlete development role and the player association versus the league, and some of the ways they support athletes. But unique to the PGA Tour is that you don't have that association because whether it's lockouts or all the things that kind of go down within a league situation. That is really interesting. And so how do you kind of navigate? So you're the phone call that's like the golfer has an issue on tour, and like there's a rules decision he doesn't agree with, or there's a sponsorship, or there's a personal issue. He's going to call you and say, how do we manage this?
Yeah, so that would be what we would call our traditional player relations. So again, there's a team of folks that would deal with that. Where our area of focus is more strategic. And so this really gets to your point, Shelley, that you just mentioned. Because the guys aren't signed to a team and there isn't a contract, they're focused on obviously playing great golf, winning tournaments, and earning purse and prize money through that activity. But because they're an independent contractor and in a sense they own their own business, what we're focused on is working with them to drive sponsorship opportunities. So if you watch any PGA Tour event, there's a logo on a hat, there's a logo on a chest, there's a logo on a bag. They basically have to stand up their own business with an agent and a manager. And so what we're doing, again, a little bit different from what you just asked, is ours is more, we sit down with a player and look at his sponsorship portfolio, look at his business, help him understand our business, and then use the vast resources that we have available that we've deployed in other areas of business and other areas I've worked on over my career to really drive new sponsorship opportunities for them. If they either they have a current partner that they're looking to renew, how do we provide metrics that would help them make a better case for more money? Or if they're pursuing a certain category, working across our different business development groups and their team to see how we can help them. So it's a very, like I said, it's a brand new area of our business, and it's strategic in our approach with those players.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense now too, and why your business background is so critical, because you're implementing, supporting basically more opportunities, creating more opportunities for your players to make money, which is cool. Okay.
Yeah. I'm curious, Dan, was there an internal board directive that drove this, or was it player initiative, where they came to you, or was it more of external in the sense that, potential sponsors were bringing these opportunities to, you felt maybe the collective, we should bring it all to one and house this in some capacity, or was it a multitude of things?
Yeah, Brian, great question. I think it starts with the fact what I mentioned earlier. We are a membership-based organization, so our mission is drive economic opportunities for our members and maximize and drive charity for the markets we play. And I think there's been a couple of things that have happened, and I'll take you back just a little bit. This was all being considered before we heard of a thing called COVID. So at our last spring board meeting in 2020, there was a movement, and again, I credit the leadership of our Commissioner Jay Monahan and our board, which has player directors that serve along with our independent directors on the board. And the discussion was around the PGA Tour. In our humble opinion, has done a phenomenal job of growing purse, what we call on-course revenue, the FedEx Cup, our Comcast Top 10. So there's lots of opportunities that if you play well, you're going to make a significant amount of money. But what we started to notice is our players help us move the needle, help kind of drive the PGA Tour. And so we've learned in other areas of our business, our title sponsorship development, our tournament business affairs, our local tournament championship management. We've seen in other areas of our business when we apply the discipline that we've developed over decades, we're able to really impact those areas in a positive way. So this all kind of came together with how can we create a new area that will support our players in a different way that ultimately helps them earn more money.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic approach because I would imagine, just given the scale, a lot of things were missed, opportunities or potential ones as a result. So just having a one-stop shop, if you will, is really going to change the game. I'm excited to see where it goes. So great. Thank you for sharing that. Now, pivoting back to something you said you got your start here in Gainesville at one of the local clubs. Is that club by chance still in operation, or is that one of those bygone ideas?
It is. And, it's funny. It's been in and out of business.
Okay.
And I think it's so funny. I chuckle about it now. It's Meadowbrook, so it's out by Santa Fe. And I mean, it was again, I think every student listening will laugh at this. I mean, it was literally me and three of my fraternity brothers were out playing golf there. And, I'm thinking about what's the job I'm going to get to help me, pay some bills and have some fun. And it was on the 16th hole. One of the guys was there. And I said, "You guys hiring?" And that led to, yeah, we are actually. And never once when we went out to play golf that day did I ever think I'd be working at Meadowbrook. And then, gosh, I don't know, with Mr. Linhart, he owned clubs all up and down from Florida. He had a place up to Maggie Valley. We bought and sold clubs. And it was just, something I never saw coming. But yeah, so we kid around. We go back for games. I've been dragging my kids there since they were little, and some days it looks green, some days it looks bankrupt. And so, anyway, but it is still there. So
no, it's funny that you say that because during COVID, it was one of the only clubs open in Gainesville. So I would take my family out there frequently, and it wasn't even on my radar before that because I was like, I'm looking for a little elevated, but
yeah.
Well,
I'll tell you a simple business philosophy that Mr. Linhart deployed was we counted cars, and his deal was we're going to have the most cars in the parking lot, and I think that still holds true to me. But I was blown away. I was just back there. We went back to a baseball game. I probably hadn't been there in a few years, and of course I drove my son who's at school there. We went through it, and there's houses where there didn't used to be houses, so it's
okay.
So all going well.
Fair enough. Good. I'm glad I asked. That's pretty cool. So you've been in the PGA for about 18 plus years, is my understanding. As you've moved through those roles, how do you think you've evolved as a leader, an innovator, and a person in general?
Yeah, boy, that's a good question. I think I'm still evolving. Hopefully, I think you're always learning something. Again, I think because I got to the PGA Tour in a different route. I had been in the club business, taking that route. I thought I wanted to grow up one day and be a general manager of a really nice golf course, and that brought me to Ponte Vedra, and I worked for a guy at Marsh Landing, and then we started a family. I thought, well, shoot, I don't want to be at the golf shop every weekend and holiday as my kids grow up and got some good advice. And then I moved to finance for a while, and I did that for a few years. And then I fortunately found my way to the PGA Tour. And so I think when you ask that question, Brian, I came into an industry where I didn't have a formal sports management background.
Okay.
I came in with a different kind of life experience, and so for me, I think I walked in and I approached it like, I've got to learn a lot. I'm going to work really hard, and so I think with every opportunity, probably that I don't know if that was just always my focus is approach the opportunity with humility and learn from those who have done this before, and just try to outwork I guess myself, but work as hard as I could. So I would say there's been a lot of evolution in my time at the PGA Tour for me personally.
Fair. No, I respect that. Yeah, I've always taken the approach, kind of spent about a year just observing, listening before you start making significant changes. And it helps with growth, I think, in that regard, because it humbles you. Like you said, you just gain perspective. So no, that's pretty awesome and helpful for our students. If you were thinking back, though, to when you started, if there was one thing that you wish you had known, that you know now or have just thought about along the way that you could change, what would that have been?
Yeah, the way I would look at it is and I hate that we're all getting older, but when I look back, when I look
too these days, so.
It's like I think the one thing that I continue to be amazed with, that I really wasn't thinking about as I was going through undergrad and into grad and everything I've done, is how important relationships are in your life. And I mean that in a way where, where everyone who's probably on here is thinking about, how do I get ahead? How do I move my career forward? What's next? Like, I would hope that's what all Gators are thinking, but I just look back, I look back at the relationships that can move you in a different way. And I don't mean that doing it in a self-serving way, but I now find myself the opportunity. I'm interviewing a lot of folks and I'm talking with folks and a lot of people I've worked with and people have worked for me. And, one guy who had a very big job at the USGA, we were chatting about this one night and we were talking about how important relationships were. And he said, I'll tell me this story. He had an intern who worked for him, who later on was his boss. And so, it's kind of one of those things where relationships, if you approach them in a very respectful manner, it's amazing. And I think the world just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Shelley, just as we were getting started, before it came on screen, it's like, so-and-so and so-and-so. And that web that comes around. And again, I would just say, if you're not treating those relationships with respect, you've got a much harder road ahead of you. So I think that would be, no one ever sat me down and said, at 20 something or whatever, like, hey, pay attention to your relationships.
Yeah.
And I guess I was pretty fortunate. But I think that would be the one thing. And I, try to pour this into the people I work with and my kids. And it's like, those relationships are important.
Yeah, no, and funny enough, I mean, a golf course is a good place to establish those relationships. So vis-a-vis 16th hole, you landed a job at 23. So there you go. You're fostering those relationships. It's good to hear that you said that, because I preach that, Shelley preaches that. This is a reoccurring theme for us, is you never know where you're going to be in relationship to another at certain times in your life. Be cognizant of that. It's just this vicious cycle, and we need to establish and maintain those relationships. So great point. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And speaking of relationships and the networking piece, for you, who are the three people who have been the most influential to you? Why is that? And kind of how have they impacted your career trajectory?
Yeah, boy, I've had so many people in my life. And again, this you kind of get retrospective, that have had a huge impact. I mean, I think for me, it starts with family and you know, there's nobody who keeps you more humble than your spouse and your kids. So but that's a different discussion.
Yeah, you can have more than 3, or you can lump them together. It's okay. I know people don't like the 3. They're like, but what if I have 4? And I'm like, it's
okay. I just, and again, I would say I'll say some people, but I think the other thing that I would say too, as I thought about that question, is I think you can learn something from everyone. And I think I was just like, there were people that I worked for that were really good at something and really bad at something. And I think you kind of have to almost be, like I said, a sponge. And you're like, okay, if I'm ever in, her job or his job, like I'm gonna do those things, but I'm not gonna do these things. So I think through every turn that my career has taken, I've just tried to kind of sponge that stuff. But I think about some shifts in my career, and where if you would a mentor or someone who probably by the grace of God just got into your life, and I was working in the club business for a great guy, Eric Schneider, and he had done everything in the PGA of America. He was master pro, did all these things, and that was, again, my path was, I want to be a general manager. And he had kids who are dear friends, and I talked to him, and I said, I'm just not sure if this is where I want to go. And we sat down, and he gave me very good advice, and it led me to actually shift out of the club business and do finance for a while. And had I not gotten that honest, again, it wasn't. There was a path in that route, but he just helped me think through all the pros and cons. And so that he was someone that I think just, again, a pivot in my career. Then I get to the PGA Tour and had a ton of great folks to work with. There was a guy, John Padani, who gave me an opportunity to work in business development, and he went on to work at the LPGA with Mike Wan and was a CEO of Arnold Palmer. And he again, a dear friend and someone that I watched and I learned a ton from him. I of course, Rick Anderson, who's also a Gator. If not for him, I don't get a job at the PGA Tour. And so everybody listening in, use your networks. We ended up at the time, there were a lot of University of Florida alumni, and Rick, and still is, he's still at the tour. And he's someone that I can always, bounce things off of. And then our current commissioner, Jay Monahan, he and I had an opportunity. He worked in Boston, did a lot of different things, and we brought him down to the tour. He was recruited down to the tour, ran the Players Championship, and he was my boss in business development for a number of years. And he's given me amazing opportunities, but I've just had the chance to get to watch him, learn from him. So I think those are, a few names, but I hate to leave anybody off the list, because there's so many people who who will help you if you're just willing to keep your ears open for that assistance.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I feel like I should reword the question, like, who have been influential, not the most. I feel like the most gets a snag. So that's awesome. And it's cool to hear, in your journey, how every job, though, it's similar to people, right? You can learn the good things and you can learn the things you want to do differently. You also, sounds like you wove that into all the roles you had, and like each one led you, you took things with you along the way. It wasn't like, even though you weren't on a tour, you weren't learning anything that was applicable. So that's really, really cool. I think for students who might have smaller jobs or jobs they don't think pertain to what they want to do next yet, but they're in college and they need to make a little money, but there is always people to gain knowledge from it and skills to learn along the way, hopefully. For them. And so what are some of the resources that helped you along the way, and how did you utilize them when kind of designing your programs, and especially in your new role moving forward?
Yeah, well, you hit on something there, Shelley. I think it sounds crazy, but it's almost like everything that I've done before, and I've kind of felt this way through my career in a weird way, kind of prepared me for the next job. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I think back when I came to the PGA Tour, I started in managing our as a manager in corporate partnerships and managing, working with our sponsors and really on their activation around the PGA Tour, mostly with tournaments, some with players, but media. And so I kind of looked at that and learned to look through a sponsor's eye, and then had the opportunity to extend some of those sponsors and, grow those areas of business. And that led me to the business development role that I was referencing. And then from there, working with John and others, then John left the LPGA and Jay came in, and I was kind of given this opportunity to go on a path to learn different areas of our business, from how do we stand up new tournaments, how do we stand up new markets. I worked on the Players Championship. At the time, we ended up running, it's the Korn Ferry Tour now, it was the Web.com Tour. We ran the Web.com Tour Championship. I got to know, that company, David Brown, who's the chairman and CEO, who is another, mentor of mine, who's just incredible, and got to learn a lot from what a corporate partner looks for. And then that kind of took me into this. If you would have asked me 15 years ago, did I ever think I would be in the role of running one of our tours? It was not even on my radar, but it pulled me in there, and it was because we had a long-term president who's, again, another mentor, Bill Calfee, great friend. He was retiring, and it was like, hey, we've got to continue to grow this business. We've got to add new events and add new sponsors, and all the things I had done before, we're going to apply right to that role. And I was plugging away, and then my phone rang, and our commissioner had a new opportunity for me, and I moved into our global strategy for business development role. I guess, if you would, a job that maybe the job he had when I worked for him, and was able to advance that. And honest to God, we were planning for what's going to happen in 2021 after coming off a wildly successful COVID year in that area. And again, my phone rang, and here's this opportunity to go and build this new business. So I think I would say a couple of things, Shelley, just to lean on the experiences I've had and fortunate to have had in all the other areas of business. But I think equally, or and maybe more importantly than that, is as I've gotten into this role, is spending time with the folks who've done this longer than I have, and those who did it before me, who have retired. I had lunch with a guy named Sid Wilson, who ran player relations. I think he started it. Sorry, Sid, but anyway. But I think you go back and you learn from those people, and then spending the last several months listening to our players, listening to their managers, listening to what it is they need. I would say those are it's a lot of resources, but that's where I think you get to a place now where, as we move forward, we're starting to really lay the framework of what we're going to do with this business.
Dan, this next question kind of shadows what you're getting at, I think. And it's how, and I think based on your 18 years of experience, not to mention all the interactions you've had, both players and or previous staff members with the PGA, how has the industry of golf changed? And what are some specific programs, if you could allude to any, that might be on the horizon with respect to the PGA? Yeah,
boy. I mean, it has changed. It changed dramatically. And I would say the acceleration of change is working at a new magnitude. Again, you think back, and I could go through every area of our business here, but I would just put one simply would be media, right? 18 years ago, you had to search to find golf. We had 3 different partners. I mean, it was, you could find 2 hours here and 2 hours there. It was all over the place. And again, strategy from a lot of great people at the PGA Tour. We consolidated that. We did what we used to call them, ironically, our network agreements. And it's a big underpinning factor for the PGA Tour. And the gentleman I mentioned earlier, Rick Anderson, go Gators, he now oversees our media. And by the way, this is a guy who was an attorney, was our general counsel. And I think it's another instructive that probably if someone would have asked him when he was graduating from the University of Florida to go into law school, do you think you'd run the tour's global media business? Probably wasn't on his radar. But I think now you look at, we've taken what used to be what we refer to as a linear broadcast on, a golf channel or one of our network partners, NBC and CBS. And as we went through the last round of those, now we call them media negotiations, not network negotiations, we did a number of things. We launched a new business, Golf TV globally with Discovery, which is something we had never really done before. We bifurcated our media rights from linear television broadcast to streaming. So for the first time, we've done that. Now we'll have ESPN Plus. The other piece of that is starting in 2022, we will take greater control over the production element. So we chose not to go launch our own network, but we've done it in a way where we will lean on great partner like Comcast, great partner like CBS Viacom for network, Golf Channel, ESPN Plus, but we will have a little more, I wouldn't say a little more, we will have control and influence over that. And then the last piece, we announced a new partnership with AWS, which we've debuted something called Every Shot Live. And this is fascinating because I can remember, again, when you think about the arena of golf, acres to cover, multiple balls in the air. It's not like a stick and ball sport or football where there's one field, one ball, everything you see laid out in front of you. And we had less than 5% of action actually appear to our fans. And with AWS, it'll be. Sorry to go long on this, but it will transform the way our fans consume golf. So we will have the ability. We've beta tested it. We debuted it at Players Championship. We will, if you can imagine, we will build a platform where every player, every shot will be captured with AI and ML, so that if you're a fan of Billy Herschel, go Gators, and you want him, and that's all you want to watch. You just want to watch Billy Herschel hit every shot. You can come in and watch that.
Okay.
Wow.
And then it starts to take on forms of what we can do globally with international feeds to certain regions with certain players. And then I think you just look at what's going on right now in the gambling space, where you start to overlay that with different, screens and opportunities where if you want to wager, you can do that. We know that we've seen it with, fantasy football and red zone, those types of things have fans lean in. So it's even hard to imagine what I just described would occur. And then I just say at every meeting we're in, it's just going faster and faster. And that's just one area. So I could I could talk about every other area of our business, but massive transformation in our sport for sure.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, to be honest, because it allows, even when your player's not doing as well as you'd like them to that day, to hone in and watch. And I think oftentimes you miss out because from the production side, you're seeing maybe the top 10, and the leaderboard or whatever. And that's discouraging sometimes because it's like, but that's not my favorite player. So I'm fascinated by where you're heading with this.
Yeah.
There's
so many applications. You could just watch players hit 10-foot putts all day long. I mean, there's going to be so much to come from that. And again, credit to a lot of smart people thinking through how we're going to do that. But that's one area that I would say really stands out as far as evolution of our business.
That's really cool. Yeah, sometimes I just like watching them on the putting green, practice rounds and stuff. I'm just like, if I could zone in on that, I'd be good for the week. So now, if you had the ear of a student per se, and I know you went more of a non-traditional perspective with respect to your degree in psychology, not sports specific, but if you could talk to a sport management student today and give them advice with respect to where the industry is and where it's going, what kind of advice would you offer with respect to their learning and education and maybe some experience, whether volunteer, internship, whatever that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, Brian, you said what I would say, and again, what I say to my son right now, or both my boys. I think there's a couple of things that I would probably, and again, when I sit with folks who work at the PGA Tour and are thinking about what's next, or when you take that to a student position. I think a couple of things. One would be very curious about everything, and curious in a way with things that interest you. I mean, I think it's the one thing that I would never want to put someone in a position of you've got to do this or you've got to do that to be successful, because I really do believe if you're curious about some area, whether it's a certain area of the business, I mean, again, you could go from ticketing to tournament operations to players to media. I'm just talking about our business, and really that transcends it to all sport. But I think, find areas where you're curious, and then you hit on again what no one told me coming through undergrad for sure was get experience in some way. I mean, I don't. There's always somebody who's looking for help, and if you're fortunate enough where you don't need to be paid to do it, and you can volunteer and you can spend time, it will open your network. It will open your eyes. You'll find out the things you like to do, find out the things you don't like to do. And I think that's very important because, as you move forward in your career, the things that you're curious about and the things that you're interested about, you can become an expert in those areas. And I'll never forget, I was new at the tour. I might've been 8 months on the job, maybe a year, and 20 something, and a little bit intimidated to go into a big meeting. And I remember being told it was a sponsor we were working with, and I was the day-to-day. And after the meeting, this individual from the aside and said, "You have to realize you are the closest to that sponsor of anyone, up to the commissioner, on this business. So you're the expert in that area." And it pushed me back for a little bit. I thought, you know what? That's pretty cool. I know more. And it was ironic. It was the Hawaii Tourism Authority, but I knew more about what was important to them. And I think that would be the guidance I would just say to students as you're venturing out is get involved in some way, find a way to help somebody. And I think that's important too. Don't do it with what's in it for me, but like, how can I help this person with whatever problem it is, and be curious about it. And I think you'll be amazed how that opens doors that you weren't intentionally trying to open, but it generally does.
Perfect. Great. I appreciate that advice.
Yeah, and for some of our students who might be starting new roles, with their undergrads, and then maybe students that have kind of transitioned into masters pretty quickly, what advice would you give them on starting new positions in big companies like the tour and things like that? And then if you could also speak to, you've transitioned roles at higher levels, and so we have some students in our master's online specific program that are transitioning and careers, or, have had a lot of experience and are trying to get the next step in the role. So just curious if you could share a little bit of advice for both of those groups.
Sure. And just to clarify, Shelley, the first question, is that how you get your foot in the door, or your foot's in the door and now what do you do?
Like your first day of work, your first week, your first month, that you're, wanting to make an impact, but also listening and being open and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, it's that old saying, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Use them accordingly. I think, to me, what I would say, and we're very fortunate. I'm blown away at the quality of people we're able to attract. So let's just say this: everybody's going into their first day on the job, and they're smart. They've gotten the job for a reason. I think one thing that I would say is, you don't have to prove how smart you are day one. I mean, I think sometimes that can set you up for failure. I think to go in, and I like to use the word humbly, be confident in what you know, but really listen, really pay attention. And I think that, to me, is probably the most important for day one through 6 months in. Again, I can remember my first days at the PGA Tour, and it was like, how many times can I reorganize my desk? What am I gonna, like? You're wanting to conquer the world, But I would assure everyone that the fire hose will be turned on, and if you're good, the hose just gets more pressure behind it. So I think that's a good thing. Would be to just listen intently. I would also say, in the right way, immediately begin networking inside the company, and that's whatever that is. If you're playing flag football, if you're in the book club, if you're whatever. People are not afraid to pour into others. So it's, hey, could you grab a cup of coffee and tell me how you got here? And I think networking becomes very important across all. But when you're in the job, right, and you're doing that. And then the last thing that I would say, where I've seen folks who have really excelled, and I would say have stood out to me. Keep in mind when you go into your first week on the job, whoever you're working for or working with, who's been there, 6 months, a year, 10 years or more, their to-do list is 1,000 miles long. They've got tons of priorities. There's a lot going on at whatever level they're in. And I think if you can approach it as, how can I help someone else succeed? How can, something that if like a lot of us in particularly these COVID days, I mean, I'm on back to back these, virtual calls. And so if there's an issue we're trying to address or a problem we're trying to solve, the ability for someone who's been there a long time to put a lot of brain power against it can be tough. But if you're new on the job and you have the opportunity to really pour into it, again, back to what I was saying earlier, become kind of expert on that area, and then to just offer up support and assistance, that to me, that stands out more to me than someone in a meeting who has to tell you how much they know and how smart they are and, all those things. But it's like when somebody shows up at your door at the end of the day and say, hey, we had that meeting yesterday at 10 o'clock and we were dealing with this, and you may have it figured out, but here's 5 things I had thought about and some homework I had done and some research I had done. Would this help you? All of a sudden, that puts you in a different perspective, I think, because now it's like, wow, this is a valued resource. He or they're going to help me, and I think that would be some guidance I might suggest on, week 1 through your first 6 months on the job.
That's great. Yeah, that's really insightful and helpful for our students, just because I think we don't talk a lot about, the big part of our role is helping them get jobs or talk through interviews, but to, for them to know, okay, what is my first week or day, especially if they don't have as much experience in those arenas. They've read about them, they've been participated, but not to be in that role. So thanks for that. And then curious, because I wanted to ask this earlier and I didn't, but how many hours, if you could be realistic for students getting in? You can just generalize. We don't need to know what your time frame is in your current role, but yeah, if you could just share a little honesty with our students on what it looks like when you first get started, and maybe a lot of the career in being in the PGA Tour.
Yeah. Oh man, that's I feel like, at least for me, my career at the PGA Tour is just a part of me. I mean, I can't. I mean, my wife would I'm, and I say this. I don't say this in a bad way. I'm always. I don't want to say always working. That sounds horrible, but I mean, I just think I'm passionate about what we do. I mean, I'm out on a run and I'm thinking about, how are we going to do this? Or, and sometimes, by the way, I would say some of those insights come in those moments, right? Where you're not just necessarily trying to grind on a presentation or something. So, I don't know. I think it also ebbs and flows. I think this is the other thing that I would say. You have to have some intelligence around the cadence of what's going on in any business or any job. There was a time, I was at the tour doing title sponsor development, finding new titles, and we went through the recession of 7, 8, and 9, and GM went bankrupt. Buick we had 4 title sponsors. Like, there was some serious moments of the world was a little bit upside down. And I think in those times, again, I would say that's when you can distinguish yourself. It's game time. I mean, we may have to pour into it a little bit more than every day. What we've just been through with COVID, it transformed the way we do business, the world does business. And I think, you have to figure out those times of cadence. And again, I've learned this from other people. There are times where you're going to really have to go harder than most. But I would say on a typical, an email is a wonderful thing. I'm joking. I think on a typical day, emails checked first thing in the morning, and I'm running on it all day long, and peel away for some family time in the evening, and I'm on it again at night and over the weekends. I mean, we kind of joke about it. A vacation. I'm not sure what that is because you seem to be always connected. But I think that's what I was saying earlier. I think you have to be curious about things you really are interested in, because to be successful, always know that there's somebody there who's going to try and outwork you, going to be as passionate about it as you are. And so, I don't know, Shelley, I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, it's great. No, you did. I love it because it's like I can say that, but to hear you, like when I'm asking the students when they're uncertain, like, okay, what are you passionate about? Like, what are you willing to wake up at 5 a.m. for and not get back home till 12, the next morning, because those will be the days. And I think for this industry, from my experience, and then just people I know in the industry, like you have to have the passion or you'll burn out quickly. And this industry really isn't for you if you're not willing to make those sacrifices, at least not in places like the tour and maybe some other professional leagues that it is hard to have a quote unquote balance of life sometimes. But then there also is unique off times, whereas it's not a 9 to 5, right? So there's seasonal times where you're going to have a little bit more break.
And look,
I don't know how much our students know that.
I was just going to say, I mean, here's the other thing I would just say is we are so fortunate to work in sport. I mean, again, we jokingly, my kids are, so where are you going this week? Oh, Pebble Beach, I'm working hard. I really, but I think regardless of whatever it is, if you're working for a college team or, working in the NFL or whatever it is, it's something you're probably passionate about. And it's like, shoot, on my days off, I'm going to play golf on vacation. That's what I love to do. So it's weird to say it. I mean, sure, there are days, look, let's be honest. There are days it's a job and you're dealing with some issue that, is not easy. But I think, and I learned this when I did my hiatus there in the middle. I worked in finance for about 4 years. And, could make a wonderful living doing that. But it wasn't what I woke up thinking about. It wasn't what I did in my free time. So I do think that's important. Great advice, Shelley.
Well, thank you. And then last question for me before I pass it to Brian's questions.
Sure.
But how do you stay healthy? It sounds like you run, but what are other ways that you're able to kind of stay healthy in a high pace, like really high pressure environment?
Yeah, it gets harder as we get older. It gets harder as you get older, particularly start travel. I try to be as active as I can. And again, it's kind of a joke in these COVID days where we sit in front of screens all day. But probably the thing I would say, the success around it, if you can, and I read this, I don't remember, but it's, for me anyway, this probably everybody's different, but for me, it's like, try to get it done early in the morning. I mean, because I think in our world of sport, and again, I'm thinking, I think about those that work in other leagues, where there's night games and there's, whatever things are going on. I just feel like if I don't have it done by 8 a.m., and that's usually when I'm taking my daughter to school. If it's not done by then, there's occasionally where, okay, I can sneak out for a lunch run, or maybe I have enough energy in the evening where I'm going to do something. But for me, it's try to eat that frog early in the morning, get it done. And then whatever the day holds, you can feel like you checked the box. But I wish I could say it was every day. I try, but it gets harder as we get older. That's for sure.
Fair enough. I'm curious. Do you play golf? I think I heard you just say you did. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your handicap?
Oh, it's all over the place. I think right now, Brian, I think I'm about around a 2 index, something 2 to 3, something like that. I'm trying to get it up, trying to get it higher for member, and member guests are coming up. I need, but no, it's there's somewhere around there. I try to break 80 when I play, and that's usually some days it's a little better than that, but that's where I am these days.
No. I'd be proud of that at the end of the day. So if our students needed to connect or could connect with you, is there a way for them to do so that you're willing to talk to them about PGA related stuff and or your position? Sure,
absolutely. Email me. And I have by the way, as I said earlier, there are a lot of people who poured into me. I actually really enjoy, it's something that I would say as I've moved through my career, again, another thing I didn't see coming, but I really enjoy the opportunity to spend time helping other people like other people have helped me. So email me. It's Dan Glod at PGATourHQ.com. Send me a note. Let me know you're a Gator. I get about probably 300-400 emails a day, so I will respond as I can. But certainly anything I can do for the great Gator Nation, I will do that for sure.
Yeah, we have always encouraged our students in the subject line, go Gators. It will garner attention, that's for sure. So, Dan, that's very generous of you. I appreciate that. Now, and speaking of students, we have one that is joining us today, Gabby.
Sure.
Welcome to the program. How you doing?
Good. How are you guys? Hi, Dan.
Hey, Gabby. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you.
So, yeah, Gabby, you have a question for Dan?
Yeah. First off, Dan, I just want to say after listening, you're definitely a testament to taking every opportunity you have and making the most of it. I can only imagine one of my college jobs turning into my career, and makes you wish I'd put a little more effort into them. But I'd love to know if you had the chance to kind of switch roles with Shelley and Brian today and ask yourself some questions. What would you have asked yourself that we didn't?
Well, first of all, I think I can tell Shelley and Brian have done this before. They've done a fantastic job. I think we covered a lot of ground. And I don't know if it would be a question, and some of it I think I've maybe answered a little bit that wasn't a direct question, but I think some of what I hear and see today, and again with 2 in college and 1 heading there, is like, okay, how do I break through? What can I do to break through to get my first job? I mean, to me, I think that's what everybody is going to face. And, when we post for a job, we have hundreds of resumes that come in. I mean, the Gators always go to the top, but I mean, honestly, we have, it comes in, and so if that would probably be a question that I would ask, and maybe that would be helpful for folks who are watching this and in school, whether undergrad or grad. And to me, and I think we hinted around it, but I would just be very direct, is I think to differentiate yourself, let's just take ground, everybody's smart, everybody's accomplished. I mean, that's what resumes will tell you, right? And so now you go, okay, I've got a bunch of smart resumes, so what is going to differentiate who we're going to hire? And I think the best way to do that is and Brian, we talked about this a little bit earlier, and that is just get engaged in some way, even if it seems like the most menial of tasks. I mean, I happen to, I'm not even sure who staffs it, but we were just at the new ballpark, watched us beat up on Ole Miss the first game, went down there and watched the game. And so I'm walking around, and this is what I would say students probably don't realize. I'm walking around the ballpark, just checking it out, and back there in the Disney Grove and up in the sway, just checking it out. And I'm noticing that there are students who are working this venue, right? And they're manning doors, they're manning elevators, they're taking tickets, like things that are just like, it seems like a very, hey, this is an entry-level job. But what I would say, and you mentioned it, Gabby, is every interaction, every opportunity that you have. And by the way, I keep my eyes out all the time for people who stand out at what they're doing. It might be a barista at Starbucks, and it's like, if he or she's really good at that, they're going to be really good at what they do. So I think, to me, that would be the differentiator is, get engaged. Think about every relationship as when I say networking, I know that's kind of a coined phrase, but it's like that can lead you somewhere that you had no idea it was about to take you. All of a sudden, so-and-so is running this part of the business, and they want you to come in, and you might start at a job that sometimes might feel beneath you, if you want to use that, but if you do a really good job there, it's going to lead to long-term success. So that would be maybe one nugget that I would share.
Yeah, definitely. I first off, did the job you're talking about. I wore that neon polo for the so when you mentioned that, it made me laugh. When I was an undergrad, I was humbled by a lot of rain, some cold games, but you keep a smile on a face. So I definitely appreciate that. And it's never letting a job be below you is really important, especially when sometimes you have to work a little backwards in sport to get ahead. So thank you for that. And thanks again for joining today.
Yeah, sure. Be curious. Ask questions. I mean, if you're standing in the elevator and that neon shirt says, "How's the game? Where are you from? What do you do?" All of a sudden, I've got a relationship with someone that I didn't have. And if he or she's like, "Oh my gosh, I've always wanted to work at the PGA Tour. That's been my lifelong goal. Well, you're a Gator. I'm a Gator. Here's my email." Now by the way, when graduation comes around and there's jobs that are open, we have a relationship, albeit very limited, but that differentiates that stack of resumes or all those applicants. So
definitely, yeah. So I couldn't agree more. It's hard to weed through the grass for sure. So thanks for that. I'll make sure to do that when I'm out and about.
Thanks, Gabby.
Cool. Thank you, Gabby. Pleasure. I think I might steal that question from you, though, Dan. Breakthrough into the industry. I think that's very important. And somehow, even though Shelley and I have been doing this a while, that's escaped us. So, but I think it's very critical to how do you break through? And we dance around it. We talk about engagement. We talk about networking. But I don't know if we've identified it as that breakthrough moment. How do you gain that attention of someone so that, you have an advantage at the end of the day? So thank you. Now, aside from all the serious stuff that we do here, we also have a fun thing we do on Voices from the Field. So hopefully you're prepared for this. But we do this rapid fire Q&A that's essentially chock full of all sorts of lighthearted questions. So Shelley, if you will.
Sure. So basically we have a 1-minute timer, and then I'm going to ask you these faraway questions, whatever comes to mind. Throw it out there. We'll just keep moving forward, and then we'll see how many you can get. And then if there's any questions you're just like, nah, you can pass on them. So feel free.
I'm all in.
All right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Here we go. First job.
Mowing yards.
When you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
When I was really little, my mom made fun of it. I used to want to be a garbage man. I would hang on the back of our car. I saw the garbage man riding down the road, and I thought, man, that's such a cool job. Probably as I got a little older, I probably focused more on, either a lawyer, doctor, probably around money. But anyway.
Okay, what's your favorite holiday?
Christmas, for sure.
What's the worst haircut you've ever had?
You have to realize I was a product of middle school and high school in the 80s and 90s. So it was bad. I mean, it was mullets, business up front, party in the back. I had lines, football numbers, a tail. I mean, there's a lot of bad photos from that time period. So I don't know, anywhere from 7th grade to probably my senior year in high school. It's not good.
Okay. And last one, favorite zoo animal?
Monkeys, I think. That would be fun. Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, we love the stories. That was great. I love the hairstyles. I definitely could picture those in person. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And Dan, I feel your pain because I was an 80s kid too. I had the rat tail.
Oh yeah. I mean, Wow, that was good looking back then, wasn't it?
You have no idea. The bowl cut straight across the face. I'm like, looking back, you're like, where was any style? Did you hate kids? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing all that with us. So,
sure.
So anyways, with that said, it's really been a pleasure, Dan. I thank you so much for your time here today. I know that the University of Florida Department of Sport Management, the College of Health and Human Performance also does, the students, the alumni, our industry friends, our faculty. I know that they'll be observing and viewing this video and the podcast. So we appreciate your time, your responses, and all your thoughts today. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Shelley, for having me. It's been my pleasure and an honor to do this. And, as we like to always close with, go Gators.
Absolutely. Well, please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at UFSPM. We are your host, Brian Avery.
And Shelley Lyle.
And Dan together. Let's say, go Gators.
Go Gators.
All right. Very good.